and the doctor made me fill out a form, asked a whole bunch of questions, and essentially his story was, yep, you have depression. The only way for you to sort of get better is take medication. Here's a prescription, on your way sort of stuff. And I left that doctor surgery with a prescription in my hand, and I was looking there at the moment. I'm like, this is not right. Like, this is not going to be the story of my life. And I was very confused, and I was like,
what do Aunt Gracie, vapes, and a phone all have in common? They all die eventually. Unfortunately, we can't do anything about Gracie or your vapes. But what I can do is help you out with your phones. My friends over at Ampere have helped us out here. You see, Ampere have an amazing range of wireless chargers that slip right into your pocket and just stick to your phone. They're completely magnetic, you forget they're there half the time, and before you know it, your phone's fully charged again. So no more stressing on when you're out clubbing, no more worrying about when you need to book a table, no more worrying when you're trying to pick up from Maui. All you have to do is go to ampere.com, use promo code Luca, you get a sweet discount, and enjoy endless wireless charging. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm here with none other than Daniel Simone. As you guys are well aware, the new premise of the show is that everyone has a story. It's a firm belief of mine, and I want to capture the most interesting, most engaging, most insightful stories that I can find around me. And Daniel, I think you fit the mold very well.
Luca, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's just start this off before we go off babbling about our travels and all of those fun adventures. One of the reasons that I really enjoy the content that you put out and the work that you do is that you just have this running theme of positivity, man. You are like a refreshing air of, that's right. Like, I need to take charge of my emotions. I need to be in control of what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And I want to know what your secret sauce is. Like, what are you high on, man? How are you doing it?
So I think, a lot of the times is about putting yourself in a state. It's about getting yourself at that higher frequency person every single day, right? And when you're able to create a blueprint or have something that you do every single day to put yourself in that state, all you need to do then is just execute on that, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to be able to wake up, put yourself in that high frequency state, because when you're elevated, when you're at that high frequency state, then you won't be able to take on all that negativity, because let's face it, we all wake up naturally negative. We're all going to feel that burden of the day in front of us. We're going to hit that snooze button, right?
I'm super guilty.
100%. So everyone does this. Everyone does it, right? And even myself too. So I know that I need to be able to wake up and I need to be able to do certain tasks throughout the morning to put myself when I'm operating at a high level. Okay. And that's going to help me remove a lot of that negative state. And most of the content, most of the stuff that I do, it comes to me when I'm, my heart rate's pumping. So I'm out there doing my morning run, or I'm on the floor doing push-ups, or I'm doing burpees, or I'm doing something that is really elevating my state. So that's really the foundation of it, right? So that's what I sort of do right now. But obviously before all that, there's a bit of a backstory that goes on with that. But that's really the core of it right now, is elevating my state and putting myself in that high frequency level.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to fall in like an autopilot because our lives are so based in routine, right? You wake up at the same time, you go to the same job, you execute the same tasks, you go home, you watch the same TV shows, you eat the same food. And when you have those patterns of behavior and when you have those patterns of thought, then you fall into a rhythm almost. And most of us aren't consciously aware of our rhythms.
100%.
I think
you can get stuck there.
Oh, absolutely.
You can get stuck there and your whole life can go past, and you can get stuck in this routine of just doing life, not actually building your dreams, not actually doing something that you want to do that's going to fulfill yourself and also impact others. And if you don't catch yourself, you don't have something that I like to do is reflect. So weekly reflection, monthly reflection, even it's daily reflection on what you're actually doing. And if you continue to do the things that you do, where will you head? Where will you end up? If you're taking the same steps today, where will you be in 1 year? Are you building a life that you want to live, or are you just a part of the system, plugging into what you need to do? And then you look up and you're 50 and you haven't really achieved anything because you're just going through the motions. Yeah.
And, I have to be completely honest with everyone at home. I was significantly late to today's podcast. A pattern of behavior that I'm working on breaking.
There you go.
Yeah. And, on the way here, I was stuck in traffic, man. It was hot. I was getting flustered. I was getting frustrated. And I knew that feeling those kinds of emotions was going to have some kind of impact on the way today's episode went. It was, and the hilarious part about that was that as soon as I got here, I caught you like mid push up.
Yep.
And I have to know, like, why push ups in a podcast studio? What are you doing?
And you know what? So let's just take it back a couple of steps there, and exactly sort of what you were saying, right, with you being on the way here. And this sort of happens to everybody. Happens to me. It happens to the best of us. Is when we're in that sort of that state when you're potentially rushing. You know, there was traffic. It was hot. Then you went into a spiral of attracting all this negative energy. All this other stuff started happening and started flowing to you because that's sort of where you were putting yourself in, and that's what you were attracting to yourself. Another story with my son. So, you know, with my son, I like to, and his name's Luca as well, but same spelling, everything. So, you know, I've got 3 kids, but with my son, he's the middle child. I like to teach him about doing push-ups and about elevating his own state. And a couple of times he's been angry or frustrated with his sister or with me or something. And every time he gets angry, he hurts himself. He'll kick his foot on the door, or he'll like trip over or do something. And I tell him that because you're in that negative state of mind, you're attracting all these things to happen to you. So just like with the push-ups, that is me trying to elevate my state. You know, the best way to elevate your state is to really just get your heart rate going, because when your heart rate's going and you're operating at a high frequency, then you can't have any of that negative energy in your body. So then that's going to bring you up. So that's why push-ups, right? It's a quick and easy thing to do. Drop down, do 10, 20, 30 push-ups. That's what I like to do when I wake up first thing in the morning. Either I do a few push-ups, either do some burpees, just to try to get my state elevated and release all that negative energy and allow that state to be elevated, which will then help me build the highest and best version of myself. Because at the end of the day, that's all we want to do is create the best and highest version of ourselves and then give that to the world. So if I'm kind of come here and have a conversation with you, I want to make sure that I'm bringing the best Daniel, the best version of me. Okay, so that's one way of doing that, just quick and easy. And anyone can do this at home. If you're finding yourself in a frustrated state, if you're finding yourself in a place where things are not working, where maybe, you know, the kids are bugging you or something's not going right at work and you're feeling frustrated and everything's all over the stop, then you'll find that you're at the low end of the frequency level. And to drop down and do push-ups like that, it's going to help you raise that. So I try to teach my kids that as well too. And this even happened to my daughter once. We were at a party, and, you know, she wasn't getting her way with whatever it was. And I actually took her around the corner of the house, and she was so angry. She was so frustrated. She couldn't even think properly. And she happened to listen to me at this point. I don't know why, but I said, let's do push-ups and burpees. And right then and there at the party around the corner, no one could see us. We did 10 push-ups and 10 burpees. And all of a sudden she forgot about everything that was making her sad. Her state changed. She started to smile. She forgot about it all, and she went on and enjoyed the party.
Right. So if that's the case, then I should probably do some push-ups.
100%. 100%.
And if you're watching this at home and you are feeling frustrated, if you're feeling angry, or if you just need a state change, I think interestingly enough, I think most people live in a state of like boredom or dullness, or like there's no spikes and dips and spikes and dips.
Yep.
You know, I think that's why something like coffee or Red Bull or anything that stimulates a heart rate, or on the other end, alcohol or, you know, pills. The reason those people are so drawn towards those is because it does create these artificial shifts in your energy, exactly right?
Those vices are the dangerous sort of things that, you know, because you want to escape where you're at or you want to change your frequency, then you go to those things like that. And it can become very dangerous when you're talking about things like that, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's get these push-ups out of the way, huh?
Let's do them.
Gosh, you're going to make me do this on air. How many are we going for?
Let's go until you fail.
Until I fail.
Until you fail, all right?
Sian, do you want to cut a camera to me? Because we're going to do this.
All right, where am I going to... So we can bang out 50.
50, all right. I like a challenge. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. 1, 2, 3. 10.
10.
10. 20.
That lactic acid starts to get up after a while, huh?
It does.
You sure you don't want to drop?
30. We'll just get to 50. 40. 40.
Easy work.
That was a good pump.
I like that.
First time we've done 50 push-ups on the podcast.
Absolutely. We've done some weird shit on this podcast, but not push-ups.
There you go.
No push-ups. Yeah, so immediate response, I'm definitely out of breath. Chest is a little bit sore.
Yep.
But more blood rushing.
100%.
More blood rushing. I feel like I've got more energy now.
A lot more energy.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of using exercise as a stress relief, as a form of almost like a meditation in a way, whether
100%.
you're lifting weights, whether you're doing something explosive. I think that feeling, that buzz, that energy that you get after a workout, if you could put that in a pill and sell it, it'd be the best-selling pill of all time.
It's active meditation, I like to call it.
Right.
So for me, I run every single day. I run 10K every day. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I'm in that sort of peak running point, like so many ideas come to me, so many answers come to me, all these solutions that I'm looking for problems come to me mid-run, when I'm about 3 or 4 Ks in, the heart's pumping, I get all these sort of answers, and it's an active meditation. Like I have music on, but I barely even hear the music.
Yeah.
So for me, when I'm out in that run,
just a little bit closer.
a bit closer.
Yeah, there we go.
So when I'm out on that run, it is, I'm in that state where my subconscious mind is going to work. So that's why you're 100% right. Active meditation, doing a workout, you're going to find so many answers that you've been looking for because they're all within you. And that's one thing a lot of people don't realize, that they often go looking for answers from external places, but the answers are within you. You need to be able to draw them out. And doing that, running, elevating that heart rate, doing push-ups, doing those things, the answers will come out. So that's one thing I like to promote as well too.
Yeah, and there's people often talk about that runner's high, like not as much anymore, but I definitely did enjoy long distance running back in the day. I was always playing soccer. I was always in cross country. And I found that I never understood people that didn't like running. I always just thought it was just so relaxing and so relieving. And like you'd be sore or you'd be tired afterwards. But that process of just doing something so repetitive over and over and over again, I mean, to do it for a very long distance, you've got no choice but to focus on your breathing, because you know what pace you can set, and you have to be very measured in how you're breathing, and you have to be in complete control, really. And the only way of really doing that is just letting your conscious mind of, I need to be here, I need to be doing this, and how's this thing going to work out, and to make that 100%, phone call, definitely. Turning that off, and then just being able to if you're listening to music, just zone in with the music and find your rhythm that way. It's an hour of that is absolute bliss for me.
And I think that's what they actually are talking about when they're talking about the runner's high. It's that state when you come back. That's what I really believe. When you finish that run, that state you're in, that's when I potentially shoot a lot of my short videos.
Right.
When I come back from my run, I plonk the phone down, and whatever thought I've had during that run is when I deliver it there.
Right.
And I'm in that state where it's just flowing from straight out the mouth, flowing, and that's some of the times when you hit those best chords, because they're resonating with you, and all those things are within you. So if you let them come out at those point in times, that's when you deliver a lot of the best sort of stuff that you have.
Yeah, it's just that battle of getting through the resistance, right? It's that battle of forcing yourself to get up, put your shoes on, and just go for that run.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of the things is with the battle is, it all starts with the night before. It all starts with the night before. That battle of getting up. So for me now, I have a process and a daily blueprint that I need to execute on. So for me, the battle for me starts the night before. I prepare to wake up early and do what I need to do. So first of all, the phone goes in the bathroom. So when the alarm goes off, you're up and you're at 'em. No snooze. There's none of that. So if you can start to eliminate a few bits and pieces, you're going to make it a lot easier for yourself.
Phone in the bathroom?
Yeah, in the bathroom.
Why the bathroom?
Well, I have to get up out of bed to get the phone.
I see.
Yes. So the phone goes in there, up out of bed. If you're going to go to the bathroom and get your phone and go back to bed, well,
yeah,
it's going to be hard. But for me, phone's in there, press the alarm off, and then just straight into what I got to do.
Yeah.
Execution. That's what I just talked about. Wake up, execute, wake up, execute. Because what will happen if you're going to lay in bed, hit that snooze button 3, 7, 9 times, right? And let's face it, the snooze button, nobody uses it really how it should be used. Everyone actually, I guarantee you, everyone who sets an alarm has the intention of how many snoozes they can hit.
Yeah.
They know. I can hit 3 snoozes. I can hit 1 snooze. They know, right? So they're already prepping themselves up to hit that snooze button. So when you hit that snooze button, when you wake up and you lay in bed and you start scrolling at your phone, that's when your thoughts are going to start overtaking you. All the things that you have to do for the day, the job you hate going to, the people you hate seeing, all the getting the kids ready for school, or all this sort of stuff will start coming into your own mind. And that's when all that negative thoughts will start to come. So if you can eliminate all that, you can get up out of bed and get into it straight away. You're going to really kick off your day in a very different way.
Interesting. Did you think
you can get stuck there?
Oh, absolutely.
You can get stuck there and your whole life can go past, and you can get stuck in this routine of just doing life, not actually building your dreams, not actually doing something that you want to do that's going to fulfill yourself and also impact others. And if you don't catch yourself, you don't have something that I like to do is reflect. So weekly reflection, monthly reflection, even it's daily reflection on what you're actually doing. And if you continue to do the things that you do, where will you head? Where will you end up? If you're taking the same steps today, where will you be in 1 year? Are you building a life that you want to live, or are you just a part of the system, plugging into what you need to do? And then you look up and you're 50 and you haven't really achieved anything because you're just going through the motions.
Yeah. And, I have to be completely honest with everyone at home. I was significantly late to today's podcast. A pattern of behavior that I'm working on breaking.
There you go.
Yeah. And, on the way here, I was stuck in traffic, man. It was hot. Yep. I was getting flustered. I was getting frustrated. And I knew that feeling those kinds of emotions was going to have some kind of impact on the way today's episode went. Mm-hmm. It was, and the hilarious part about that was that as soon as I got here, I caught you like mid push-up.
Yep.
And I have to know, like, why push-ups in a podcast studio? What are you doing?
And you know what? So let's just take it back a couple of steps there, and exactly sort of what you were saying, right, with you being on the way here. And this sort of happens to everybody. Happens to me. It happens to the best of us. Is when we're in that sort of that state when you're potentially rushing. There was traffic. It was hot. Then you went into a spiral of attracting all this negative energy. All this other stuff started happening and started flowing to you because that's sort of where you were putting yourself in, and that's what you were attracting to yourself. Another story with my son. So, with my son, I like to, and his name's Luca as well, but same. So it was just like, minute you wake up, now I'm waking up doing push-ups. Back then I was waking up, going outside, had my first cigarette at 5 a.m. before we went to site,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely, was definitely not always like this. Like for me, I remember, my dad had to come and wake me up when we used to go to work, or I just didn't want to go to work. It was never like that. But it wasn't until, there was a moment in time where I realized that if I wanted to create a life for myself, I actually had to go out there and do that. I couldn't rely on my parents to go and give me everything, do everything for me. And that's not how life was.
What do you mean, like they gave you everything? Like, because I can't imagine you were 25 years old just living off mummy and daddy's checks.
Well, I mean, I never had any sort of real struggles. Yes, like I worked for my dad and, we had everything easy in life. You know what I mean? Like I drove my parents' car. I had my dad's work car because I worked in the business. I had a petrol card. Like, my bed was made. My clothes were like there ready. And dinner was sort of like, it was just very easy. You know what I mean? Like that sort of stuff. Everything was sort of given to me. I never had to really sort of buy anything or work for anything until I started to sort of in that sort of, younger 20s, 25-ish sort of age. And I started to, realize that, I wanted to start a business, do a building company. I was just like, come on, guys, let's do it. Let's do this. And when I started going down that journey, that's when I realized that, your parents just don't give you everything. Like they don't just give you a business, because I was like, guys, let's start a business. Like, can you start it for me? And I'll do it. But I didn't even know what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that sort of way, like there was no real struggle. I didn't have to sort of like, my dad had to buy his own mattress when he was growing up. My dad had to sort of help support the family and give money back to his family and things like that. So, for me, I just sort of ran with that. I was very spoiled, got everything I wanted, like whatever holidays we wanted to go on, whatever we wanted to do, I just got in that sort of way,
And it's interesting that you came to the realization of that, because I think that takes a lot of self-awareness to realize that you are falling into those traps. And there's an age-old expression that the son of a great man is not usually as great as the man himself, because
I love it.
When someone when someone has to go through adversity, when someone has to struggle, when someone has to support their family and work overnight hours and scrape by with bare minimum to go and find success,
Definitely.
they've built the character, they've built the determination and the resilience that if at any point in time, if it gets taken away from them, they've got the skill set to go and do it again. That's why you see like billionaires or millionaires that go bust and then they just go and build something else. There's a formula it's you can't take away who the person actually is. And I think, you know, ironically enough, the saddest or the people that really struggle to find purpose and meaning in life are genuinely the people that were born into very rich families. Like I can't imagine what it must be like to be born into the Kardashian family, for example.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because when you've got all the access in the world and everyone wants a piece of you and you don't have to work for a single thing. Your parents are both billionaires. All your aunties, your uncles, everyone that's associated with your family, just by having that last name Kardashian, you've got endless amounts of opportunity to make money, endless amounts of opportunities to go to the best parties and hang out with the coolest people.
Yeah, definitely.
So at what point do you define who you are?
Yep.
It's literally impossible.
Yep.
You can't do it.
Well, that's sort of one of the things, like, you know, on that sort of Kardashian sort of thing. Right now, I've got 3 young kids, and, you know, this is the thought that I have. And how do you bring up your kids where you want to give them everything, but you still want to install those values, you know, that hard work ethic within them, and let them know that not everything's just sort of given to them. Like, you know, when my daughter, my eldest daughter, she's turning 7 tomorrow actually, her first understanding of money was money came out of mummy's purse.
Right.
You know, she was like, where's the money come from? And she was like, oh, mummy's purse. Because when we went to church and the coin collection would come around, she would, you know, get the coins out of there. So it's how to teach those values. And I think, you know, going back to what you said about going through adversity where you're able to really find yourself, and that's sort of, you know, the part of my story where I went through that adversity and that sort of hard time in my life, which sort of transformed me into the person that I'm becoming today and the person that I am right now. And that was when I sort of, you know, suffered depression. And that was, for me, a very difficult time in my life. That was sort of the biggest part of adversity that I had gone through at that stage in my life. And, you know, I tell you the story of sort of how it sort of unraveled. I suffered many panic attacks and was just feeling really down, didn't want to get out of bed, you know, all those symptoms. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to the doctor. My mum said, like, go to the doctor and go. My wife said, you know, go see what they say. Anyway,
how
so
old were you at the time?
Oh, I was married. Probably had one. So this is probably about 5-6 years ago. So 29, 30.
Right.
31.
So you were 30 years old, married,
29.
settled down, probably looking at having kids or had a kid.
Yeah, I think my daughter was already born.
Right.
So yeah, it would have been.
So you've essentially ticked off a lot of people's bucket list items.
Yeah.
Like you've built yourself this picture perfect life, white picket fence, house, loving wife, family, and you're hit with depression.
Yep, and that's exactly right. And you know, so what happened was, went to the doctors, and the doctor made me fill out a form, asked a whole bunch of questions, and essentially his story was, yep, you have depression. The only way for you to sort of get better is take medication. Here's a prescription, you know, on your way sort of stuff. And I left that doctor surgery with a prescription in my hand, and I was looking there at the moment. I'm like, this is not right. Like, you know, this is not going to be the story of my life. And I was very confused, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a second opinion. So I'm going to go to another doctor. And I went, same thing. Fill this out, do this, ask the questions. He said, yep, you got depression. We can write you a script for medication. So here I am now after going to 2 doctors, and I'm like, yeah. No. So I rang my mum. And my mum's had her own journey and her own struggles with that sort of stuff as well too. And she's like, Dan, you know, this is not your story. She's like, go see her doctor, just general GPs. She go see him, have a bit of a chat. And we had a chat, and he's like, you know, you don't have depression. You know, we can change this story. And he took a very different approach, right? So here I am right now after visiting these 3 doctors. I have a bit of a decision to make, you know, as in which story do I want to believe? Do I want to believe the story of the first few doctors, take this medication and, you know, be on medication and suffer depression? Or do I want to choose a different story and not take that and be like, this is not going to define me. This is not going to be who I am. This is not going to be, well, it is part of my story, but it's not going to be, not going to be that story where I'm just on medication now for depression, right? So I chose that different path. And this is where, my mum has been very huge into spiritual healing, into, all of that sort of, personal development side of things. And I started learning that path about my body, meditation, about the script that you're telling yourself. I really started going down that entire path, and that led me just down a path of personal development, getting to know everything about myself and really reflecting. So here we are now, 6 years later, where no meditation, and I have all these processes, I have all these systems, this blueprint that I follow every single day to create the best and highest version of myself, to eliminate all that negativity out of my body. And, one of the things I seen with all that medication was it was just going to, it was going to fix the problem. It wasn't going to actually get to the cause of it, right? And it needed a lot of work.
What did they prescribe you?
I don't know the exact.
I assume it was an SSRI.
I don't know. I didn't even, to be honest, past receiving the prescription, I didn't really take much notice, and it was more just the whole, I've got a prescription for depression, whether it be whatever it was. I was more in that shocked state of mind when I was actually sort of knew what it was. So I don't really know, or didn't really pay much attention to what it was.
Yeah, the way I understand it is that in the past they released a whole bunch of documents and a whole bunch of studies that essentially said that by chemically inducing the serotonin processes in our brain, we're able to combat depression, because increased levels of serotonin will force that brain to have an oversupply, and then it won't be sad anymore, because serotonin is essentially the happiness chemical.
Yep.
And that was essentially put out by all the major pharmaceutical companies, name them Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, all of the above. They all came out with very similar studies. And I think only recently, perhaps 2 or 3 months ago, they were kind of forced to admit to say, these antidepressants don't actually work. They don't actually, because you can't chemically, I'm not exactly sure about the science. I'm not a scientist. It's definitely worth putting that out there. But they were essentially forced to admit that, these SSRIs don't work. You can't just use an antidepressant and expect to be happy. And I know a couple of people that take antidepressants and take some quite heavy ones. And I can tell you now, firsthand experience, they're just as miserable now as what they started 10 years ago.
They don't have any emotions. All the emotions sort of taken out of it. And what I sort of believe is, and what I actually practice right now, is you can create that state. You can create it. You have to earn it. You have to go out there and put in the work every single day to earn it. Through physical exercise, through reflection, there's so many things that you can actually do to actually go out there and earn it. And when you earn that, when you change that state and you actually stick to that sort of stuff, it's much better than jumping on something and taking this medication where you're not actually your own self.
Yeah.
So I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that they can actually go out there and earn that. They can change their own state. They can work on those things to do that.
I'm sure there are people that are born with some form of chemical imbalance or some form of there's every physical shape and form of a human being that exists. So to pretend like there aren't going to be some people that are just more lenient towards the pessimistic view of life of course those kinds of people exist. And of course, we need to find the right treatments and solutions. But I think for the vast majority of people that at least claim to be suffering depression, or kind of like you are, you just get this cookie cutter stencil of questions that you have to answer. And then they go, oh yeah, you've got depression. Just take this pill, buy it once a week and you're sweet.
Yeah, exactly right.
I would imagine the majority of them aren't taking care of their physical health.
Well, 100%. And for me, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I know for me, that would have been the easy way out. It would have been the easy way out. I could have just said, you know what? Yep, this is who I am now. This is my life. I'm going to take these tablets or these whatever the hell that got subscribed to me. It would have been the easy way out, because I would have just given up and taken that. But to be able to go out there and face the day, and it was hard afterwards. It didn't happen overnight. There was times where, I was at the gym and I felt like all the walls were closing in on me and I had to leave the gym and go home, and I literally wanted to go under the covers of my bed and didn't want to leave the bed. And,
Wow.
So it wasn't easy, but however, it was a daily process and I was working at it, and I was just working on the story that I was telling myself, and I was just building upon wins. And I think, people don't understand that all they need to do is just build wins. Build small incremental wins over the day, win the day. Then you do the same thing the next day and you just keep building on top of those wins. And that's what I was doing. I was just changing the self-talk. Okay, I did this. I got this result. That was good. Do that again. Do that again. And I was just building on that. And when I woke up in the morning, it just got to the point where I simply had to fight to get up out of bed, right? Because I know that when I didn't get out of bed, it would just be a downward spiral. So I would fight and force myself up out of bed. And this was in the earlier stages where I have a different routine what I want now, but I forced myself up, got out, and I just built that on top of that. So if people can understand that they can build themselves from a few small wins, stack those wins, put in the work, you can definitely work at changing your state and potentially, quote unquote, not be depressed as what you actually think you are.
What did you turn to during those periods when you weren't, when you weren't the Daniel that we know now, but you were the Daniel of the past, and you didn't have the information or have the resources or have the life experience to go, okay, if I just continue with this routine and I continue with this path and I stay on top of the thoughts that I'm repeating into myself over and over again, how did you build those habits?
Trial and error.
Trial and error.
It's literally just, wanted to absorb as much knowledge as possible. So, when my mother started to sort of, lead me down this path of meditation. So I was like, okay, what's meditation?
Yep.
And then I was like, everyone was talking about you need to practice gratitude. So I'm like, okay, what's gratitude? So I had spent a year of my life trying to understand what gratitude was, how to practice gratitude. And then, that led me to trying it, trying to practice gratitude here and then trying to meditate and trying all these different things and figuring out what works for me. And then as you go to one thing and then, just finding things that work for you. So that's what I think the most important thing is trying and holding on to something that works for you and then adapting. But none of that can happen if you don't reflect. You need to be able to reflect about what happened, what results you got from that, and how did it work and how did it benefit you. And then you just keep building it.
I hear you, but if I'm sitting on the couch with a bag of Cheetos and I don't feel like getting up, I doubt that I'm spending much time in the reflection stage initially, because I'm just looking for distraction, and distractions all around us our day. You can jump on your phone and access 500 different websites at the same time. You can turn your TV on and throw on YouTube or watch the news. You can find yourself in these patterns, and I think what a lot of people struggle with is changing that behavior. I know it in myself. I, for example, I have a very, love-hate relationship with nicotine. I love it. It hates me. And I think breaking that cycle of reaching for the cigarette or reaching for the vape, it's like, I know I should do it. I know I should or in the other case, I know I should spend time reflecting, but I feel for most people, it's not until they hit a threshold of pain. So how do you avoid that threshold of pain? How do you just force yourself to do it?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to avoid that, right? It's the same thing when it got to me for smoking. I was at the point where the doctor told me I had lungs of a 60-year-old man at age, I don't know, mid-20s, 25 or something like that. So, a lot of the times, you can, the same with books, right? Everyone tells you to read books. The reason is, you pay $20 for a book is someone's put their whole life experience in the book. If you're smart enough to take that advice and run with it, the same thing with, addiction or with smoking. If you look at someone who's, had a life of smoking and you're like, wow, that's what a life of smoking would do to me or a life of drinking would do to me, then you have to be smart enough to say, okay, well, this is something I should probably stop, or I shouldn't maybe do this, or someone's, been down that path before and look where they ended up, I shouldn't do this. And the other part of it is disgust. A big part of for me was I was disgusted with myself. I was 15 kilos heavier than what I am right now. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, man, I am disgusted with myself. I looked in the mirror and I was like, what is going on? But when I say look in the mirror, I mean, I think so many people every day look in the mirror and they don't actually see themselves. they don't actually see themselves because they just glance. They're not actually looking deep at themselves and saying, you know, what is it about that you want to change that you don't like? And I was disgusted. I was like looking at myself, 15 kilos overweight, smoking, drinking. I was like, where is this version of me going to end up if he continues it the way he is? So sometimes you can't avoid it. You know, you're just going to have to sort of hit that path and go for it. And other times, you know, you may need to get to that point of disgust. Because when you have those emotions, then it's going to really force some change. And people may not know what to do with change. And, you know, all I did was I found some mentors, some people that I liked what they did. And I'm like, that guy, I like what he does. I'm going to try some of that.
Any names that stuck out to you?
So I think, you know, a couple of books stick out to me. So The 4 Agreements is one book that I definitely recommend reading. And I think, you know, practicing meditation, practicing gratitude were big things for me. You know, I think, you know, specific sort of people, not so much. I mean, there's a lot of people that I listen to right now that I follow a lot of and sort of what they sort of say. But I think, you know, a lot of the messaging is very sort of similar. So I think it's good for people to find out who resonates with them,
right.
You know? So part of my personal development journey, I think it's more about books, not so much specific sort of people. So for me, you know, book recommendations that I believe everyone should read in any journey of their life would be The 4 Agreements is definitely one of them. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is another one of my top 5 books. Also Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink is another one of my top books as well too. Winning is another one. That's by... Do you
want to pull that up, Sian? Winning?
It's Michael Jordan's coach. I forgot his name now.
I'm not a big basketball fan.
Sorry,
I'll throw it in there.
Yeah.
I'll throw it in there.
So, you know, those are the books that sort of, you know, really... and I recommend for anybody looking to sort of go down that personal development sort of path. And I think right now we have a world of content. I think it's just people just need to sort of, you know, start somewhere, you know, start with those few books that I recommended and then just really find someone who you resonate with.
The 4 Agreements is a very interesting one. It's a very interesting one to me because it follows these cultures and these religious beliefs of tribes. We're talking thousands and thousands of years ago, and they had these specks of wisdom. They had these specks of knowledge that, you know, today, even though the world and the culture and technology and information and relationships wouldn't even be comparable to what it was 2,000-3,000 years ago, it seems that there are some core fundamental human truths that just repeat over and over and over again. It doesn't matter the generation, it doesn't matter the time spent, and you can apply any one of the 4 agreements to a modern context and it makes perfect sense. I think one of them is like always do your best.
Always do your best.
Always do your best. So simple, but it's like, like why would you go and participate in a task and choose to be there and give it 50%? And
then don't take anything personally.
Don't take another person.
Yeah, that was a big one for me as well too. Like, you know, now I realize when someone says something to you or, you know, it's not actually about you, it's about them. You know, so, you know, people will try to not attack you, but they'll come at you with their emotions, right? And you just happen to be the person that's standing in front of them when they have to let that stuff out. So don't take anything personally. It was a big one for me. Yeah,
when you look at it from the perspective of we're all just one unified being experiencing itself over and over again. And you're saying, you know, like you are me just as much as I am you. And so if we are the same thing, then of course I want to be nice to myself because you're me. So why would I be mean to myself? Like, why wouldn't I be nice to myself? So then, and in nature, if you're receiving kindness or if you're receiving love or if you're receiving gratitude from someone, then that's going to compel you to reciprocate that.
100%. And that goes with the universal law as in, you know, what you put out is what you will receive, you know, and I'm a big believer in that is, you know, so I try to put out as much positivity. I try to, you know, not talk bad behind people's backs. I try to just really be truth and transparency because I believe whatever you put out in the universe will give back to you tenfold. And that's something where, you know, I try to reflect on that as in what am I putting out in the universe right now? And that's what I really start to look at right now. And you know, I try to do that in what do I want? if someone's lonely, they can go and give somebody company. If someone wants money, they can give away more money. So that's stuff that I'm trying to practice a lot more right now in my life.
If you're lonely, then it's worth your time to go and give your attention to someone else.
Yes.
Because you're feeling that lack of attention or that lack of affection.
Well, because you're putting it out to the universe, you know what I mean? You're putting it out there that what you most want is what you most need to give. So whatever you're trying to attract is what you need to give most.
I don't have $1 million to give to anyone.
Yeah, but so it's not about the figure, right? But it's about that. And this is sort of something that, this is big for me right now, which is I'm trying to dabble in and try to work in that way because I know it to be true, but I may not be doing it to the best of my ability. But it's not a matter of like the amount, but it's also a matter of just, how you give things away or how you help where you can't and things like that to your own capacity. You know what I mean? And that's a big thing for me right now. And that's something that I really focus on right now. That's the thing that I'm sort of trying to dabble in the most, is in understanding what I most want and how do I then give that to the world, to the universe, for me to then attract that back.
Do you want water? I'm a bit thirsty. I could top it up.
We can get some. Yeah, let's top it up.
Imagine with that perspective then, and the perspective of giving and the perspective of wanting to help other people, you would like hone in on those experiences, like when you were facing depression and when you were facing difficult times, and you would draw a lot of value out of those because, like you said, when you're an entitled kid and when you've got everything handed to you by mum and dad, there's not many lessons to be learnt.
Exactly.
You want something, you just get it.
Exactly right.
So what do you feel like were the most important lessons of your hardest times?
So I think, important lessons, that's a really good question. So I go back to when I was going through that depression, and I always come back to the story of the doctors in that sort of moment. And I think one of the most important things I learned was the story. The story that you tell yourself is what's going to dictate your life. And it doesn't have to be the story of somebody else. So I could have taken the story of those first couple of doctors who said, you have depression, take the tablets. So I think that was a lesson that I have to continue to reflect on. What story am I currently saying about myself? And is that true? And is that the story I want to continue moving forward? And that's something I think is probably one of the biggest things most people can have a look at and reflect upon themselves, is the story they are telling themselves. And is that story their own story? Is that story being passed down from a parent to them? Is that story being passed from society to them? Is that story coming from an external factor? And really reflect on that story. So I believe that moment there was something that I learnt, that you have to continue to evaluate the story you're telling yourself.
So what story do you tell yourself now?
So right now I tell myself, I really look at the person who I want to be. So I look at that and saying, my story right now is the story of becoming the best version of myself and what is holding me back from those scenarios, right? So it's that, that same sort of natural negative talk of everybody's that I'm not good enough and I'm a fraud and I'm not doing this correctly. And that sort of stuff where, like even just coming on this podcast, doing those things like that, is you have that sort of imposter syndrome that I'm not good enough for this, or I shouldn't jump on and talk. So it's that sort of stuff there to able to share the message a little more. So for me, I want to share the message as much as possible. So I got to be able to get out of my own way. So it's the ego, that story, whereas in you're not going to influence people. Your story doesn't mean crap to nobody. Who are you to go and talk about your story? Who are you to share your message? Who are you to do that? So it's that stuff. So the more you can let go of that and believe that the world needs your story, the world needs you, that allows me to be more of myself. So it's just a little bit of that story around about that ego, around a little bit of that sort of stuff there.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people facing that, man, because especially now in the age of social media, and for all its, marvelous thing that's been able to do in connecting you and I, if it wasn't for social media, we wouldn't even know each other.
100%.
And the communication aspect of it, it's, a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I'm forever grateful for it. But it does definitely have a dark side. And I know if at 1 a.m. I'm scrolling through Instagram, 9 times out of 10 I'm feeling like shit because, that person's further of life, further ahead in life than I am, or that person's won something, or that person's on that holiday, or that person's wearing the clothes, and it creates like its own ecosystem of lack.
Yep. 100%. And that's why it's so hard and that's why it's very tricky it's easy to fall down that rabbit hole, but you have to sort of, control yourself not to be able to fall down that rabbit hole and focus on other sort of things, right? And that's where it comes back to gratitude. And what are you doing scrolling your phone at 1 a.m?
That is a good question.
Like for me, like when I hit that bed, I'm freaking out like a lion. And then but I think it's very easy to fall down that sort of rabbit hole of looking at other people and saying, why am I not there? Or that person's better than me. They're further along than I am. And that's a part of the story creation, especially, you're a bit younger than I am, but especially that generation, our generation is growing up with that sort of stuff. And then that will form that story about you. That person's this far along in life, so I should be here. I'm no good. I'm crap. You're starting to form a story. So that's why it comes back to the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah, it's so powerful, just the way the human brain works. Like, I think Tony Robbins puts it as your brain is a computer, and the computer always has an answer to whatever questions you ask. You just have to ask it the right questions.
Correct.
So,
or be in a state to receive the answers.
That's true as well. But it could be as simple as, instead of saying we're never going to get this done, like there's a project that's coming up and it's due on this date and it's a massive workload, and the immediate response or the natural response is we're never going to get this done. It's coming from a place of hopelessness. But then if you just ask yourself, well, how can we get this done?
Exactly right.
It's a simple question. It's a bit of fine tuning, but automatically your brain goes into a different pathway.
It does.
Okay, if I just get this resource, and maybe if I look for an extension here, or if I move things around, I can juice this, then we can pull it off.
And you take action towards that. All you need to do is find something, take one action, and the universe will start giving you everything else. That's all people, sometimes people overcomplicate things, is they just need to be able to find the next step. So whatever that next step is, find that next step, take that next step, and the next step will come when you're ready for it.
If you could speak to yourself, if you could speak to the kid that was 20 years old, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, getting drunk, hanging out with girls, partying, having a great time, but deep down inside was unsatisfied and unhappy with life, what would you tell him?
I mean, what I would tell him, I don't know what I would tell him, but I don't even know if he would listen, to be honest.
I love the honesty.
He probably wouldn't even listen. He probably wouldn't even listen. I think, to go back and talk to my younger self and give that one message, I don't know, because I think as in like, it really changed the whole course of my life, So part of me would be, I think it's simply don't waste time. I think I just wasted a lot of time back then. Just a lot of time just stuffing around. I think that was the biggest sort of thing right now. And I think one of the things now, when I say as I get older, I'm only 35 years old, but it's all time. It's time with the family. It's time with the kids. I think back then, like, if I did a few things differently when I was a bit younger and didn't stuff around so much, I may have a little bit more time now and a little bit later. So I'm just like, don't waste the time and everything that goes around all of that. Yeah. A lot of wasted time.
Time is such an interesting thing, because when you have a lot of it, you don't value it. But then as you get older and you realize that clock is ticking and that we're all facing the same door at the end of the day, you value it so much more.
And especially when you start to have a family, you start to have kids, and, there's a lot more different focuses on life. My kids have got so many activities to do and so much stuff is happening. So to have that sort of time is definitely, a big priority.
Yeah. So you frequently train, you frequently work
every day.
out every day. 7 days a week, don't miss it.
7 days a week, don't miss it.
Christmas?
I trained on Christmas.
Wow.
Yep.
That's dedication.
Yep. So here's the thing, right? Like, and this is actually something that I heard from Jacko, but it's definitely true. And this is sort of, life will give you a rest day. Something's going to happen in life, kids or some sort of schedule or something where you'll sort of almost be forced to take a sort of rest day. And for me, why would I want to take a rest day from creating the best, highest version for myself? Like, that is not something I need to take a rest from. For me, running, training in the gym, doing that physical exercise, getting that high version of myself and creating the best Daniel for the world, that's not something I need a break from. that's something I need more of, you know, because that's just, you know, that puts me in that best state as possible. So 7 days a week, we're training.
What's that training look like?
Legit. I run 10K every single day.
Wow.
I've run that probably close to about a year and a half now. So I've been running for probably about 4 or 5 years. Started off at 6K, long story short, built it up to 10K. 10K used to be a quarterly event for me. Then it went a monthly event. And then I'm like 6 went to 7, went to 8, went to 9, went to 10. And now I'm like, I run 10K every day.
Wow.
9 to 10K. And New Year's Day I ran 20K because I just wanted to get that. It was bugging me for a little bit. And then at night, so I train twice a day. At night, I'll do either boxing or I'll do weights training.
Interesting. How long have you been boxing for?
I think I've been boxing for about 10 years training.
Right.
I started probably before I got married, or around about that sort of time. So probably about 10 years on and off, just training and stuff like that.
Were you sparring?
I sparred when I started. No, I don't think I started. When I first started, I wasn't sparring. There was a period there where I went to another gym where I did spar a little bit here and there. So, I sparred a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a whole bunch.
It's an interesting angle because the endurance that's required for running and the endurance that's required for sparring or fighting is so different.
Yeah.
It's so different.
Yeah.
I've sparred people that are physically fitter than me that if we went just run until you drop, they'd clear the water. They'd have no issues. But then in sparring, when your anxiety is heightened and you're more aware and your vision almost becomes very narrowed in because you're just so paying attention to the people's shoulder movement or the way where their eyes are, and you're in that heightened state. It's so much more draining.
Yep.
And I always encourage it, whether it's, a lot of people want to avoid the head trauma, or they want to avoid the risk of concussion, which is absolutely fair enough. But even in jiu-jitsu, I mean, you roll around in jiu-jitsu for 30 minutes and you are breaking a sweat. You are working.
100%. And one thing that I like to talk about as well too, that if people with anxiety or people with depression, I think it's a good sport. And here's the reason why. So a lot of the times I would go straight to the gym from work and have all these stresses and have all this anxiety and have all this stuff going on. But when you're in the gym, just sort of standard sort of gym, that's going to help. But if you're boxing, if you've got an opponent in front of you and you don't have 100% focus, you're getting knocked out.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen. So you need to have that total concentration. And when you're totally concentrated on the person in front of you, all that anxiety, all that other stuff is all just gone.
Yeah.
And another example of that is when I was at the beach one day and I was deep and it was very wavy and I had to have total focus about the waves and about all my surroundings, that there's no possible time in that moment where I can have anxiety or I can have those things. I need to be concentrated on what I'm doing. So that's something that definitely can help with anxiety and things like that, where you need to have that total focus and total control.
Yeah, when you're punched in the face, you're not worried about what Rachel said at the office.
100%. Yep. So that's why it's another thing to focus on, to really just, because you need to be zoned in at that sort of time. So sparring is really good.
So you've boxed on and off for 10 years, but you've never got into the ring?
No, like when I say box, it's more just training boxing is probably the better way of putting it. So I got in the ring last year. So it was a bucket list of mine for a couple of years, wanting to get in the ring and actually sort of fight. So last year I did the Contender. It was an amateur sort of setup charity night fight. Did that, ended up doing that twice. So last year I had 2 amateur fights.
How did that opportunity come about?
So our gym just joined the Contender. So your gym joins the Contender, and then whoever wants to do that, they do that. So then I was, obviously talking to the coaches about wanting to be able to do that, because our gym wasn't really a fight gym at that time. It was more just a boxing training style part of a gym. But I just had that urge to do that and, put it out to the universe, and it just came about.
Which gym do you train at?
I train at Shadowbox HQ over at Smeaton Grange.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one. Not familiar with that one. And so you just go to your coaches and you're just like, hey, like this amateur thing's coming around, I want to fight.
Yeah, I was like, you know what, like they knew for a while that it was a bucket list of mine, and they weren't really going to head down that sort of path. But this opportunity came up for them to be a part of that because there was a couple of other people in the gym that also wanted to do that as well too. They looked into it. Long story short, they said, "Yep, we're going to join this." And then, long behold, we end up having 10 fighters from our gym put in their hand, and all first timers. Like the gym is not a gym where you'd go. At the time, if you were looking to sort of fight, it is starting to come that little bit way now. But we ended up having, 10 of the people wanted to jump in and do it. So it was awesome.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And how was it?
It was great.
Stepping into the ring.
I absolutely loved it. I mean, I love the physical aspect of the training. So for me, the fun part was the training, was getting after it, working with the team, putting in the effort. But getting in the ring was, I don't know if I would say it was scary because, I was able to control that self-talk. I was able to sort of, listen to my coach. And I think that really helped control the nerves. That was just me saying, I've been in a ring. I've sparred before. It's this guy's first time. He's just as nervous as what I am. So using those things that I've learnt throughout my journey allowed me to sort of, really enjoy it, control the nerves, and I think focusing on him, thinking that he was the same as what I was, really helped me calm down, and it allowed me just to really enjoy it. And being in the fight, yeah, it was tough. Like, you're punching each other. I copped some good hits, and when you're even in that process, it's that self-talk when you're in the fighting, like, shit, he's got me in the head, or oh man, that hurt, or he's coming for me, oh, cover up, like, oh no, like he's on top, like you just, all that sort of thought, and there's a couple of times there in the second fight that I had later in the year, in the first round, he was all over me, and I was like, whoa, it caught me off guard, like, and I was like, oh, that's it. I was like, stuff this, like, I've done my work, give up, like throwing the towels, like, that's it, done. And I had that bitch voice starting to come into my own head, but there was that self-talk was like, nah, stay strong, get to the round, got to the end of the round. And my coach was like, man, he's going to gas, hold strong. And literally he gassed and I just outworked him in the next 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really good experience.
Yeah.
If anyone's looking to do it, who's ever is in any sort of combat sport and hasn't gotten in the ring, you got to do it.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
I know that you sort of might want to do that as well too.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We could line something up.
Yeah. It's definitely an experience worth having, once, twice, a couple times, but it's really, really awesome journey.
Are you looking at going back?
No.
Done?
No, done. Like,
done.
And for me now, I'm going to help coach the next round of guys coming through. So I'm going to be part of the coaching guys there, helping with mindset and training and that. But I think, that's what I wanted to do. I achieved that. I did that, and that was done. Now I'm on to my next challenge. So, I want to help those guys around the mindset going through that. So now, because I've had that experience, I can help them through the mindset side of doing that. But my challenge this year is I want to run a full marathon, so 40 Ks.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it doesn't really scare me, so I think it's going to have to be something else. But
do you find that you constantly have to be setting yourself challenges, like getting into a boxing ring or doing a marathon? Or
yeah, I just want to push myself.
Right.
I want to test myself, and I want to experience all these things in life. Life has got so much to offer, but if we just sitting there on the lounge watching TV, we're not going to experience anything. And I want to push myself. I want to challenge myself. And that's where you learn so much about yourself, is right at the edge of that fears. You're pushing your body to the limits. How far can you go? How much more can you stretch? How much more can you do? Same with the running. It went from 6K to 10K. Then I did 20. Now I want to do 40. It's always just that next sort of challenge, and I really just
it's almost like it's constantly being a state of having to prove yourself to yourself. It's like proving, okay, well, I've done this thing. I know I can do it. So now running 20Ks doesn't give me the same hit as what it used to, because before 20Ks felt impossible.
Yep.
And if I can accomplish this impossible thing, then it's like almost like, oh, I'm satisfied now. Like I've done it. But as soon as you hit that point, as soon as you hit that level, you just start looking elsewhere. You're like, okay, well, can I do 40? Nah. And that no is what triggers you to go, okay, no, like I want to prove that guy wrong now.
And you also, you're also learning more about yourself. You're finding those darker places that you haven't yet been to learn more about yourself. So those challenges that you need to put yourself through is that difficult stuff where you can find more out about yourself. And that's what I love about it. I love finding that new thing that I didn't know about myself, or discovering something else that I didn't know. And then ultimately it all comes down to helping others. You know, if I go through difficult times, then I can help other people through difficult times.
A lot of people struggle with the notion of leveling up, of, you know, taking a step in the right direction and self-sabotaging. You know I do this a lot with nicotine, where it's like, well, if I quit for 3 days and I go back, it's not a big deal. But if I quit for 6 months and go back, I've got a lot to lose. So I screw myself over in the short term because I'm scared of failing in the long term. And I feel like a lot of people do struggle with that notion of self-sabotaging. And I wonder if you've ever encountered that and how you combat that.
It's identity. It's your identity. And I think we all struggle with identity. I'm probably going through an identity right now that I'm trying to create and evolve into the next version of myself. So going back to the smoking, I was known as the party Daniel who smoked and drank. So that was my identity. So a part of it is that self-sabotage you need to be able to let go of the current identity to allow yourself to step into that new identity. And this could be identity that you attach yourself with, right? So I attached myself to that identity of that young boy who smoked, who drank, who partied all the time. And I believed that was my identity. So one of the things I had to do was I had to visualize the new Daniel I wanted to create. What does that new Daniel look like? And I had to step into that new identity and let go of the other identity. So that's what I think is the most biggest thing. And this comes down to, you know, with the clients that I sort of help coach with their weight loss and with their mindset journey, it all comes down to their current mentality and their current identity of who they are to who they want to become. Because what will happen is they'll take 10 steps forward, but that they're still tied to that old identity and it'll just keep pulling them back. 10 steps forward, they have to really create that new identity first in their head, then they can go after it while letting go of the current identity.
I see. So it's creating a separation between who you are and who you want to be, and then not allowing yourself to go back to who you used to be.
Correct. You have the need to keep that vision of the person you want to become crystal clear. And it's going to take, you know, there's different methods of doing it. Everything works for different, whether it be meditation, whether it be vision boards, whether it be body types that you want to achieve or things that you want. You need to create something that you can constantly reflect on while you're chasing that sort of, that new identity of yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a really helpful way of looking at it, because when you look at it almost as a costume you're putting on and turning that costume into a uniform, and if you identify with a higher version of yourself, then naturally your actions is just going to reflect that identity that you want to step into.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at it. I like that. How do you think your perspective shifted after having kids?
Yeah, great question. I mean, and I think really perspective shifted after having kids. You know, I think it took a little bit of time for it to sink in. You know, it didn't necessarily sort of happen in that instant moment when my daughter was born. I think it took, you know, a little bit of time to come home and really start to sort of settle in. The perspective for me was time, like we spoke about before. But I think what I like to talk about is something called the Last Supper. So my perspective shifted where all I thought life was just about myself and just about doing whatever I wanted to do. And once I had the kids, I realized that it was about the family. And I realized that life was about the journey to the Last Supper, okay? So I visioned my life to the journey towards the Last Supper. And the Last Supper being, you know, the image that we all know of the Last Supper, myself being the head of the table, my wife sitting right next to me, the whole table filled with pasta and bread and wine. And I have all of my kids next to me, all of my grandkids there and great grandkids there. And that's the Last Supper, essentially my Last Supper before I die. And I look at that. And when I had kids, my perspective shifted to everything towards that Last Supper, that what's going to matter most to me when I'm sitting at that table of the Last Supper. And most of the stuff that we worry about every day, when you're sitting there at the table, when you're 80, 90, 100 years old, what's going to really matter to you the most? So that was one of the biggest perspective shifts, and that didn't necessarily happen straight away. That was something that evolved for me as, you know, the kids grew up and whatnot. And that's been an evolution of mine where I believe our life's journey is the journey to the Last Supper. You know, and that's what I think about when I get up at 2 a.m. and have to get the kids and they're crying. And with my wife watching this, she gets up 90% of the time. I get up 10% of the time. Or she gets up 1%, I get up 90%. But whatever it is, you know, it's the journey to the Last Supper. So that's the biggest perspective change with the kids.
For anyone that's listening at home, and they are struggling with depression or they are struggling to get themselves off the couch.
Yep.
What would you tell them to get them off?
So I think, you know, depression and then being on the couch and you know, doing that sort of stuff is that you can. A lot of people don't see their own worth within themselves. A lot of people believe they're destined for whatever is in front of them. And I think people struggle with that self-belief. And a lot of the times when helping people and coaching people is that, you know, I see what's inside of people and we try to pull that out. So I think anybody that's sort of stuck sitting on the couch is they need to understand that they can. If I can, you can. I was somebody who was smoking, drinking, who didn't care about anything, and I completely changed my whole life. So you can do it.
Awesome. Daniel, I know that you do work with clients.
Yes.
I know that you do bring people on board and you help them more one-on-one.
Yep.
If they are interested in doing so, how can they do it?
They can just reach me, Instagram, DanSim412, DanSim412. Hit me up on Instagram. They can come and connect with me right there. They can send me a message. They can have a look at the content. You know, I can see what they're looking to do and how I can best help them. So that's the best place to reach me.
Well, Daniel, you're a breath of fresh air in the world. You
Awesome.
do an amazing job at spreading the positivity and also teaching the lessons along the way in helping people shape their own stories. And I think, personally for me, I think that's such an important aspect of it because I've heard so many stories now and I've heard so many perspectives. And I find that having the ability to hold the pen to the paper and dictate what your life is going to be, not what it has already been, is absolutely the most important thing, the most important skill a person can develop. So thank you for your work. I really appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Guys, go check out Daniel's page on Instagram. I will leave a link in the description down below. If you haven't already, smash the subscribe button. Thank you very much. Daniel, again, thank you for your time, man.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And again, I apologize for being late.
It's all right. We paid for it with the push-ups.
Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.